Great stuff. Okay, thanks for that, Alex. Thanks, everyone. Last but not least, hey? So today I'm going to be talking about impacts in mega archaeological infrastructure projects. It's not so much lessons learned as perhaps lessons we could learn. I'm thinking back to the great slide that Alex presented at the beginning of the session with all of the mega archaeology projects that have been run over recent years, some in the distant past, some in the present, and some just about to begin. And what I'm most interested in is how we can understand those lessons learned, not just within the universe of each individual project, but how we can meaningfully compare and contrast between all of these and roll that learning and knowledge into the next mega infrastructure projects. Now, looked through the lens of public benefit and social impacts, that's actually quite difficult. Despite some of the amazing results that we've seen presented today, I think it's fair to say that archaeology really struggles with defining what its public benefit is, what its impact is, and consequently, how we can measure it. And this is marvelously exemplified in this cartoon by these two boffins. Here, I imagine them talking to each other saying, yes, we've just completed a small evaluation on a contaminated carpet factory in Kidderminster. A miracle occurred and we created some place shaping. Or we had an open day in Preston. A miracle happened and then we had some health and well-being. Well, today's presentation is all about, my lessons learned is about how we can be explicit about those middle steps. Because clearly doing any good for society is a good thing. Archaeology is a good thing. But a lack of clarity about the difference that our programs can make, who they make them for, and a methodology for collecting the evidence that underpins our very often aspirational claims is really undermining our program. So today I'll describe how we do this at Dig Ventures. I'm looking forward to how we hope to do this with the Access Plus post-excavation team, looking at the social impact and looking after the EDI and the SEE and the legacy dimensions of what I think is the megaest of mega archaeological projects. Now, in the forthcoming issue of CIFA's The Archaeologist, I've written a short piece about how archaeology stands at what I think is a crossroads, evolving from what we used to think of as quality, which was a discipline valued for its research excellence, to one increasingly judged by its societal impact. I argue that this has led to what I think is an identity crisis as the discipline navigates between these two potential organisational futures. Are we knowledge organisations like libraries, research institutions, or consulting firms who excel first and foremost at managing information? Or are we creative organisations like design agencies or arts collectives or innovation labs, which really judge their efficacy by their ability to engage new audiences? Well, as we can see from the work that's been presented today, archaeology can do both, but what if it could do more? What if we could bring these identities together, simultaneously embracing our creative programming with public engagement and a consistent advancing of rigorous archaeological research? Well, in this rosy future, the first thing that we'd need to do that would be a practical social impact methodology, something based on empirical evidence that can empower our teams and archaeologists to design and capture the full spectrum of their work. Now, such a methodology would demand us answering some really fundamental questions. Why do archaeologists exist as practitioners? What's the meaningful change that we're actually creating? And who truly benefits from our work? Now, if we can address these questions clearly, we can then build empirical evaluation systems that capture our complete impact, from knowledge creation to community transformation. Now, that may sound straightforward, but in the context of archaeology, it's quite difficult because there's nothing that we can pick up off the peg to help us do this. This can be summed up in the term econometrics. Unlike financial metrics, there's no standardized way to measure the true value of archaeological programs. So many archaeologists, many organizations default to standard tools like social return on investment models that try to satisfy government and procurement funders. But this approach often misses the big picture. It leads to very awkward ways of expressing our value, such as one particular called contingent valuation methodology. This is a way that we ask citizens to put a cash value on what would they pay per year to maintain a historic asset. Now, according to a recent report commissioned by Historic England, for pre-industrial high streets, citizens would have a willingness to pay of £7.80 per household per year to maintain that high street. For the industrial area, it's £6.31. And for post-industrial, I don't know if that's buy one, get one free, perhaps. But you can see we're really missing some essential something in this model. Now, at Dig Ventures, we've tried to characterize what this essential something is by drawing on knowledge from impact investing. We've devised a model that makes critical distinctions between our outputs, that's the tangible products and services that we create, things like field surveys or public events, and the outcomes, that's the observable changes that are created as a consequence of our work for individuals and communities. Now, true impact is the effect directly attributable to from our output on our outcome. And we can evaluate this in two measures, through breadth, through how many people we reach, and through depth, how significantly we can change their lives. We can organize this into what we call a theory of change, and here's a close-up on our theory of change, just illustrating the outputs and the outcomes. And you can see the three different levels there, which articulate the uniqueness, the essential something of archaeology. At the very top, we have our intrinsic outcomes. That's our contribution to knowledge. In that middle row there, we have our instrumental outcomes. For a Dig Ventures case, our participants, but that could equally be our teams of professionals on the ground. And then at the very bottom, that final instrumental outcome is for the communities in which our work takes place. Thanks to Sadie Watson as well for this figure, which also features in one of her publications. Now, that's perhaps the what of our impact model. This now comes on to the how. How do we ensure that we're actually making the changes that we suggest that we are? And to do that, we have this tool called a Standards of Evidence Framework. This is a ladder of evidential certainty. At each ascending level, we gather potentially progressively stronger evidence that says that we're responsible for the change that we're seeing. So at level one, we might just simply document the activities that took place, or perhaps how many people attended them, while at higher levels, we can see causal relationships between our work and the specific outcomes that we're recording. Again, we can see this happen in different levels. Our intrinsic outcomes for the historic environment, our instrumental outcomes for the people involved in our projects, and the instrumental outcomes for our communities. Now, finally, we can bring this all together into a project-specific matrix. This combines the elements of our theory of change on one hand and the standards of evidence on the other. And to bring this back to the mega archaeology projects, here's something that we're working on at the moment to help us structure our baseline review for HS2. Now, I'll talk you through this, assuming quite a lot of knowledge in the room already about HS2. You can see on that column on the far left, there are HERDS objectives, and you can see our rows again split across the different areas, that spectrum of knowledge and creative outcomes. So our instrumental outcomes sit in the middle and the bottom, and our intrinsic outcomes sit at the top. And already we can see that our HERDS objectives, our high-level HERDS objectives, map very evenly across those three different priorities for HS2. So knowledge creation at the top, SEE, EDI, our team in the middle, and community and legacy at the bottom. But what we're missing is the specific objectives, probably because of the stage of the project we're at, but it shows the opportunities that we now have, because nearly 95% of our specific objectives sit purely in knowledge creation. So already we can see that if we're serious about really moving the needle for those instrumental outcomes, we need to look again at our specific objectives, either refine what exists or create new ones that can really guide our work. Our next column along is our outputs. These are the activities that we will do throughout the project. As you can see in that top, some very familiar terra firma for us, our project designs and our reports. But as we move into our other layers, we can see much more creative programming, much more creative endeavors. Our columns to the right of that relate to the HS2's priorities and ultimately the Department of Transport's priorities in terms of its benefit outcomes, and our supplier scorecard on that side, which really is about how we demonstrate the service levels of the contract. Very good. So the main thing to remember is this isn't just a way of us capturing what happened. This is both a formative and a summative tool. It's a formative tool in that it shows the areas that we can lean into, that we can really creatively program around. And it's a summative tool because it points to the evidence that we need to collect in order to show that we're moving up that ladder of certainty. This continuous evaluation helps us refine our approach throughout the project. It would help us compare different projects and ensure that we're delivering ever increasing benefits. And so finally to the why. Well, I think it's been no surprise to anyone that we've gone through something of a vibe change in public expenditure recently. Reading the press at the moment, I don't think batshed has become an adjective, but we're very, very quickly going in that direction. Now, the question is, are we net contributors or inhibitors to growth? I think if it's the former, we need to get much, much better at proving our value than just saying a miracle occurs or it's £6.31 per person. A clearly articulated process for designing and measuring our impact means that we can get in front of this debate. We can clearly demonstrate the immediate and long-term investment and benefit for archaeology. It means we're not just documenting what we do, we're actively shaping the value that we create for society. To a person with a hammer, every problem is a nail. And if we take a one-size-fits-all approach to archaeological impact, we'll limit our scope to design for better outcomes. Instead, think of this as a methodology, a new tool for our tool bags, another way for us to design and evaluate the impact that we create. By embracing both the knowledge and creative imperatives of archaeology, we can enhance our capacity to resiliently serve individuals, communities, and our own organisations. And that, I think, is measuring what matters. Thanks.